She looked me dead in the eye and said, "It was last week. Not tomorrow. Not later. Last week. The wedding I helped pay for. Renovated the house for. And I wasn't even invited." They laughed while I folded napkins. They toasted while I stood alone. But the moment I saw that photo, her smile without me in it, I didn't get angry. I got quiet. And when a man like me goes quiet, that's when the storm begins. I remember the moment it hit me like a punch to the gut. It was just a regular Thursday night. Nothing dramatic. No storm brewing. No raised voices. Just the soft clatter of silverware and the quiet whirl of the kitchen fan. I was at the dining table, folding napkins into those little rose shapes, thinking I was helping Clara prepare for her brother Caleb's wedding, which, as far as I knew, was happening the next day. I had even ironed my dress shirt earlier that day, shined up my only good pair of shoes, the ones I reserve for events where I'm expected to smile and make small talk. I looked up and asked, "You excited for tomorrow?" Just making conversation as I shaped another napkin. Clara blinked at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Her head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing like I'd just told her snow was made of fire. And then she said it, in the flattest tone I've ever heard from her. "It was last week." I chuckled. Thought she was messing with me. She had that dry sense of humor and always followed her jokes with a grin or a jab. But this time, nothing. Just silence. She picked up her phone, tapped around for a second, then handed it to me like she was passing the salt. And there it was, the truth staring back at me. Caleb and Hannah, arm in arm under a wooden arch covered in white roses and string lights. Guests gathered by a peaceful lake, champagne in hand. Eli, her cousin and Caleb's best man, was actually crying. The whole thing was captured perfectly. And there in the middle of it all was Clara, my wife, glowing in an emerald green dress I didn't even know she owned. Her hair done in perfect curls, makeup flawless. Smiling like she belonged there. Because she did. Everyone there did. Except me. I kept swiping through photo after photo, hoping to catch even a glimpse of myself. Maybe a sliver of my jacket in the corner of a frame. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I forgot I had gone. Maybe they were pulling some elaborate prank. But no, I wasn't in a single shot. Not even a shadow. I slowly set the phone down, feeling my throat tighten. I looked at Clara, waiting. Waiting for something. An apology. A reason. Anything that made her feel human again. She just went right back to folding napkins, humming some tune like nothing had happened. From the couch, her sister Sabrina called out, "Didn't we tell you?" She said it casually, like she was talking about the weather. I turned my head and saw her scrolling through her phone, legs crossed, sipping red wine like this was just background noise. Their mother, Vivian, was sitting beside her. She let out this deep, belly-shaking laugh. "Oh goodness," she said, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes with a tissue she tugged from her sleeve. "I could have sworn we told you." Not one of them looked apologetic. Not one looked remotely surprised. It was like I was the forgetful one, the one who'd somehow failed to teleport to a wedding I never even knew was happening. I stood there, napkin still in hand, feeling the ground drop out from beneath me. The hum of the fan, the faint clink of the wine glass, all of it faded into the background. My world narrowed to a single, cold truth. I wasn't part of this family. Not really. Not anymore. This wasn't some accidental oversight. This wasn't bad communication. This was deliberate. A message. And I heard it loud and clear. I didn't matter. Not enough to be invited. Not enough to be missed. I didn't argue. Didn't raise my voice. I wouldn't give them that. Instead, I just gathered the dinner plates and started rinsing them in the sink. My hands worked on autopilot, scraping bits of food into the drain, but my mind was stuck on that photo. Clara smiling beside her brother like the world was perfect. And maybe it was without me in it. She could have told me. I'd been asking about the wedding for weeks. When it was, what to wear, whether I should pick up a gift. She always brushed it off. Said things were still up in the air. Said nothing was finalized. Lies. All of it. That night, I laid beside her in bed, both of us facing opposite directions. Our backs not even touching. She kept scrolling on her phone until she drifted off to sleep. Me? I just stared at the ceiling. Not sad. Not angry. Just hollow. I thought about the past few months, how often they made plans without me. How I was never added to the group chats. How dinners somehow kept happening without my name ever being mentioned. And that one time Sabrina joked that I was the plus one who got subtracted. I laughed then. I actually laughed. Now I understood. It wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't poor planning. It was calculated. I had been erased. And what hurt most wasn't the betrayal, it was how casually they did it. Like they'd done it before. Like it was nothing new. Like I was the only fool still standing in the dark. I picked up my phone again, opened the photo, zoomed in on Clara's emerald dress, that lakeside background, the warmth in her smile. And none of it was for me. I turned the phone face down on the nightstand. Something shifted inside me. Quietly. It wasn't rage. It wasn't some fiery vow for revenge. It was colder than that. Still. Focused. Controlled. They thought I'd stay silent. That I'd just keep folding napkins, play my part. But that night, sleep didn't come. Not even a flicker. I lay there beside Clara, watching her breathe, calm and undisturbed, like she didn't have a care in the world. And all I could think was, how long have I been invisible to these people? I turned carefully to my side, picked up my phone again, and opened the wedding album I had saved from her screen. I looked at every single face, every laugh, every touch. Everyone was present emotionally, physically, completely. Everyone but me. Not in the background. Not in a mirror. Not even as a silhouette. Because I wasn't meant to be there. I wasn't forgotten. I was excluded. On purpose. And it wasn't just the wedding. That was just the tip of it. This went way deeper. I thought back to the weeks leading up to it, helping Caleb fix up his new house. He'd called me about a leak under the guest bathroom sink. I got my plumber over there. The guy's quote came back too high, so I covered part of it without making a fuss. Just sent the difference to the company myself. Then came the broken fence, the kitchen tiles, the faulty breaker box. I was there for all of it. Hands-on. Helpful. Because that's what family does, right? At least, that's what I believed. Now I see it clearly. I wasn't loved. I was used. Not included. Just useful. That's what I was. Like some tool they pull out when needed and toss back in the drawer when they're done. As Clara shifted in her sleep, I stared at her shape in the dim room. She looked so at peace, like someone who'd just thrown a flawless party. I couldn't help but wonder, did she smile when they raised their glasses for Caleb? Did she give a speech? Did she say I was traveling? On a work trip? Or worse, did no one even ask about me at all? The thought made me feel sick. By 5 in the morning, I was already up, wandering through the house like a shadow. Quiet. Invisible. Familiar. I brewed a cup of coffee but skipped breakfast. Then I sat down at the dining table, the same one where we used to laugh and make weekend plans, and just stared across at the empty chair that used to mean something. Eventually, I opened my laptop. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about clarity. The kind that's cold and sharp and leaves no room for pretending. I opened my old spreadsheets, the ones where I tracked our expenses. Row by row, I started combing through the past 2 years. Tens of thousands poured into Caleb's house projects. Another big chunk into Vivian's endless repairs. A few generous slices towards Sabrina's dream salon, the one that crashed within 3 months of opening. And not once did anyone bring up paying me back. I never even asked. Because back then, I didn't keep track. I told myself it didn't matter. But now? Now it mattered. As I stared at the numbers, it hit me hard. I had become more valuable to them financially than emotionally. I wasn't part of their family. I was part of their foundation. Something they built on. Not someone they built with. Around 7, Clara shuffled into the room in her robe, yawning and rubbing her eyes. She smiled like it was just any other morning, kissed my cheek lightly, and said, "Morning." I replied just as calmly, "Morning." My voice didn't even crack. She poured herself a cup of coffee, sat across from me, and pulled out her phone like everything was fine. I watched her for a bit, sipping slowly, scrolling like she didn't have a care in the world. Like nothing had happened. Like breaking someone's trust was just normal. That kind of peace? I couldn't understand it. How do you sit across from the person you left out of your brother's wedding like it's just a regular Thursday? "What are you working on?" she asked. I still glued to her screen. "Just reviewing a few numbers," I said. She gave a half-interested nod and kept scrolling. That's when it truly landed. She didn't expect me to ask questions. Not about the wedding. Not about the pictures. Not even about being deliberately left out of something any loving partner would be part of. And right there, the quiet inside me began to shift. It hardened. Not the kind of quiet that gives up. The kind that sharpens. That watches. That makes a plan. I didn't argue with her. I didn't raise my voice. What would be the point? Vivian would laugh it off. Sabrina would call me dramatic. Caleb would act clueless. And Clara would offer something hollow like, I didn't think it was a big deal. I had faded in my own marriage. I was still physically here, eating, working, sleeping, but I had been emotionally erased. So I decided to embrace it. From that day on, I moved different. I stopped talking at dinner. She didn't even blink. I quit bringing up family outings or weekend plans. She didn't ask why. When her mom called and Clara left her phone on speaker, I just sat and listened. And what I heard, it confirmed everything. Vivian talked about me like I was a contractor. What does he think? Is he paying for it? Tell him we'll let him know when we need him. I wasn't even in the room anymore, not to them. So I became what they already believed I was. Unseen. But deep inside, I was wide awake. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, not yet. But I knew something had shifted. Something real. Permanent. And it had nothing to do with rage. It was about awareness. They had relied on me being steady, quiet, forgiving, easy to overlook. But that version of me was gone. They just hadn't realized it yet. It was a bright Sunday when I made a mistake. I drove past Sabrina's house. I wasn't invited, obviously, but something pulled me there anyway. Maybe I was hoping to feel included again. Maybe I was just clinging to a dumb habit I hadn't let go of yet. I'm still not sure. What I do know is, as I slowed near her driveway, I recognized every single car out front. Sabrina's red coupe, Vivian's bulky SUV, Caleb's shiny new sedan. Each one hit like a name I never made it onto the list for. And through the open windows, laughter. Not polite, surface-level laughter. Real, genuine joy. Someone turned up music. I heard dishes clinking, chairs sliding on the wood floors. I could even smell bacon through my car window. I'd cooked that bacon for them before. Sabrina liked hers crispy. Vivian used to scold me if I burned the edges. Back then, I took that as a weird sign of affection. Correction meant care, or so I believed. But that morning, sitting alone in a car I paid for, parked outside a house I helped renovate, something inside me broke. They were together, laughing, eating, living. And once again, I was the ghost they never named. I stared at the sidewalk for a long time, watched strangers walk their dogs, push their strollers. The world moved around me like nothing had changed, except everything had. They never saw me as one of them. I was the guy they called when something needed fixing. That's it. 3 months earlier, Myra's husband, Miles, had called me in a panic. Water heater blew. Sabrina was freaking out. I got someone there within the hour. Paid for the whole thing. No questions asked. He said he'd pay me back when his client check cleared. He never did. Then there were the new windows at Vivian's place. The old ones leaked. I arranged the whole job and wired the deposit myself. No one even said thank you. It wasn't kindness they saw. It was expected. Like breathing. And I let it happen. I didn't want to admit that. But sitting in that car, watching the front door swing open and trays of food being carried inside, it hit me all at once. I wasn't family. I was the emergency fund with a heartbeat. And they didn't even bother to pretend otherwise. I drove off without a word. Familiar streets rolled by, but they didn't comfort me like they used to. Even the park bench where Clara and I once made up after a huge fight felt fake now. Like the warmth had been scrubbed away. When I pulled into our driveway, I didn't go inside right away. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, looking at the house I thought was ours. But even it felt borrowed now. Temporary. Like I'd been holding a key to a place I was never truly welcome in. I stepped inside quietly. The living room was still. Shopping bags sat in a sloppy pile by the stairs. Clara must have gone out with Sabrina yesterday. Probably another trip to pick out something for Caleb's housewarming, or some other trivial excuse to spend a day together. I didn't ask. I didn't want to hand her a chance to lie. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water, walked into the study, and called Julian. Julian and I went way back, college roommates, best man at my wedding, one of the few people I could count on without question. These days, he was a lawyer, sharp, efficient, and brutally honest. Clara's family never really liked him. Said he was too direct. I always thought that was his best trait. I'd take blunt over fake any day. Long time, he said as he answered. Everything all right? No, I replied, but it will be. He didn't ask for details. He just waited. So I told him everything. The wedding. The photos. Sitting in my car outside Sabrina's brunch like some forgotten relative, hoping someone would remember me. I told him about the money I poured into that family, into their homes, their businesses, their problems, while they quietly pushed me out of the picture. He was silent for a long moment. Then he asked, "You want out?" I didn't answer right away. I stared out the study window, watching a squirrel dart along the fence. "No," I said at last. "I want silence." Julian paused. "You don't want to confront them?" I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. They don't deserve a confrontation. They twist it around. Make a joke of it. Act like I was overreacting. I don't need a fight. I need silence. Clean, sharp, final. He exhaled. All right, he said. Then let's get to work. We started talking through it. The accounts, the transfers, every hidden thread that tied me to the Bennett's financially. I'd kept most things under my name or my holding company, but I'd never enforced boundaries. That was about to change. That night, we drafted the first set of documents. And when I hung up, I didn't feel fury. I didn't feel sadness. What I felt was clarity, cold and solid. I walked back into the living room. Clara was curled up on the couch, laughing softly at something Sabrina must have texted. She looked up and smiled. "You okay?" she asked, like the ground hadn't just shifted beneath us. I nodded, and as I looked at her, I saw exactly what she believed, that I would always be here, always available, always providing, always staying. And in that second, I understood. They hadn't erased me because they hated me. They erased me because they assumed I'd never leave. That following Monday, Julian and I met for breakfast. We picked a quiet diner just outside the city, the kind of place where no one asks questions and everyone minds their own business. I didn't want to meet in a boardroom or at his office. This wasn't war. This was a decision, a correction. Julian brought a folder with him, thick, neatly organized. He slid it across the table without a word. "It's all here," he said, tapping the cover. "Renovation reimbursements, maintenance payouts, contributions, all funneled through your personal holding firm. You've been generous." I opened the folder. Pages of contracts, authorizations, all the little things I'd signed without blinking. Because back then, helping them made me feel included. Useful. Part of something. I want it all paused, I said quietly. Every payment. Every transfer. Nothing goes through unless they come to me directly. Julian nodded. "I'll submit the order today. I've already set up alerts in case they try anything shady." I sipped my coffee, picturing Vivian's face when the plumber called and told her the funds hadn't cleared. The confusion in Sabrina's voice when her contractor packed up mid-job. Clara trying to smooth it over with some excuse about system errors or miscommunication. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. That afternoon, I sat in my study and began detaching myself from every loose thread I'd been tied to. I called the gardener who mowed Vivian's lawn and told him not to expect next month's check. I emailed the insurance agent and canceled the coverage extension I'd added for Sabrina's leaky roof. I didn't give reasons. No speeches. Just clean cuts. One at a time. Quiet. Precise. Then I waited. It took 5 days. On the 6th morning, I was sitting on the porch sipping coffee when my phone buzzed. Vivian's name lit up on the screen. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel curious. I just wanted to hear how she'd spin it. "Hello." I answered, calm as ever, like I was picking up a call from an old coworker. "Oh, thank God," she sighed, her voice as dramatic as always. "Darling, I just spoke with that dreadful contractor. He said the kitchen renovations are on hold. Something about payments not going through." I said nothing. "I told him it had to be a mistake," she continued. "Of course you always handle these things. Is it something with the bank?" I leaned back in my chair, watching the wind chimes sway. The same ones Clara had picked out 2 summers ago. "No mistake," I said, my voice even. There was a pause on the other end. I could almost hear her scrambling. I'm sorry," she said. I let out a dry chuckle. "Didn't I tell you?" I repeated it again, softer, the same cold tone Clara once used at the dinner table. "Didn't I tell you?" She hesitated, unsure whether to laugh, to argue, to ask if this was a joke. But I didn't give her the chance. "You can take it up with Caleb or Sabrina," I said. "I'm sure they've got it covered." And then I ended the call. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It felt like turning off a light. Later that day, Sabrina texted me. Just 2 words, payment issue. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the filing cabinet and pulled out a folder I had recently labeled Bennett Affairs. Because now I called things what they were. I placed it beside the rest, business accounts, real estate holdings, family trusts. And as I looked at the stack, it hit me. Every single person in that family had taken something from me, and not one of them had ever made me feel like I belonged. That night, Clara made pasta. I heard her humming as she stirred in the kitchen. She never asked how my day went. She never mentioned the phone calls. No sign she knew her mother had been cut off, or that Sabrina was now pacing in frustration. Instead, she asked what my weekend looked like. I told her I'd be working. She smiled, but her eyes didn't follow. They were flat, tired, Or maybe just trying to pretend nothing had shifted. The next evening, I walked in and found her mother and sister sitting in the living room. Vivian stood up the second I entered, the way a politician does when pretending to greet an old supporter. "Oh, good. You're home," she said. Her voice strained, tight, trying and failing to hide a mix of fear, confusion, and entitlement. Sabrina gave a small wave. "We thought we'd talk face to face. Clear the air." I didn't sit down. I walked straight to the hallway table, pulled out the envelope I'd prepared that morning, and handed it to Vivian. She opened it right there. Inside was a neat packet of receipts, contractor invoices, repair orders. A detailed record of every single thing I'd paid for over the past 3 years. Every pipe, every tile, every wall patched up with my money. "This," I said plainly, "is what family has cost me." Her eyes darted across the documents. And for the first time, I saw something resembling recognition. I kept speaking. I never used to keep score. Because I thought I was part of something. I thought love meant sharing, building together. Turns out, I was just footing a tab I didn't know was open. She tried to interrupt. I didn't let her. "That account's closed now." And with that, I turned and walked upstairs. Shut the door behind me. I didn't hear them leave. Didn't listen for their voices. I didn't care. For the first time in what felt like forever, the house was truly quiet. Not tense. Not fake. Just still. And I liked it. Clara acted like nothing happened. Like her mother and sister hadn't just sat in our home clutching proof that I had been their silent sponsor for years. Like I hadn't just delivered reality to their doorstep. That night, she made lemon chicken with roasted potatoes. Her peace offering dinner. The one she always cooked when things felt off, but she didn't want to talk about it. But I wasn't interested. Not in food. Not in playing along. "You've barely touched your plate," she said, cutting into her chicken. "I'm not hungry," I replied. I still on mine, but mine far away. She set her fork down gently. "You could have told me you were cutting them off." I looked at her. "You could have told me about your brother's wedding." Her lips parted slightly, then closed again. I caught it from the corner of my eye, that flicker, that moment where someone decides if lying is still worth the energy. This time, she didn't bother denying it. She just reached for her wine. "It was a misunderstanding," she muttered. "It wasn't intentional. You're reading too much into this." I turned to face her. "A misunderstanding is forgetting to pick up milk, not cutting your husband out of a wedding." She flinched barely, but enough. And for a breath, I thought there might be a trace of guilt behind her eyes. But then it faded, replaced by that same cold, practiced calm. "You're being dramatic," she said. There it was. The final nail. But it didn't sting. Not anymore. I'd already bled out. What was left was just the ash of what used to be. "I'm moving into the guest room," I said, quiet but firm. "Starting tonight." She didn't react at first. Just stared at me like I'd told her I'd rearranged the living room furniture. "Seriously," she said. "You're going to mope around the house like some ghost?" I stood up, carried my half-eaten plate to the sink. "No," I said. "I'm finally living like someone who's wide awake." That night, I moved downstairs. The guest room was small, barely more than a storage space. But it was mine. I changed the sheets, cleared out the drawers. And for the first time in months, I slept without the weight of pretending. The days that followed were quiet, but not in a calm way, more like the silence that lingers after a battlefield clears. The kind where you're waiting to see who moves first. I kept to myself, cooked my own meals, did my own laundry. When Clara left for work, she stopped saying goodbye. When she came home, she'd glance at the guest room door like it offended her just by existing. I didn't care. I wasn't going to cushion her guilt anymore. A week passed before she tried to push the reset button. I heard her voice one evening, light and cheerful. She was calling her mother, apparently inviting her and Sabrina over for wine and dessert. Another, let's talk it out performance. I didn't object. I didn't storm out. I just stayed in my room and listened. Delphina opened with one of her signature digs, a joke dressed up in silk. "I always said you had a dramatic streak," she laughed. "You should have gone into acting. Might have kept you too busy to cancel our roof repairs." Clara laughed. Sabrina chimed in from the kitchen. Something about how I must be having a midlife ego crisis. I stepped out of the guest room. Slow. Quiet. None of them noticed right away. Then Delphina looked up, smile still frozen on her face, until she saw what I was holding. Another envelope. She rolled her eyes, still clinging to the role of amused matriarch. "What now?" "Another receipt rundown, sweetheart." "No," I said. "This one's on the house." I walked over to the coffee table, set it down between the wine glasses and dessert plates. Inside were no invoices this time. Just emails. Screenshots of texts. Messages between contractors and family members. All requesting upgrades, lavish add-ons, premium features they never needed. Because, in Sabrina's own words, he's good for it. This, I said calmly, is what entitlement looks like. In writing. The laughter stopped. Even Sabrina stopped stirring her drink. Delphina opened the envelope, flipped through the pages, and for once, had nothing to say. I turned to Clara. She was frozen in place, a spoon hovering above her dessert bowl. I'm not here to argue, I said. And I don't want anything back. I paused, making sure they heard me. I just wanted to remind you that I was never invisible. You just stopped looking. Then I turned around, walked back to my room, and left them there, dressed up in curated fashion, surrounded by half-eaten tiramisu and bitter wine. They didn't follow. Later that night, I heard the front door slam. Tires screeched away down the street. Clara didn't come downstairs. She stayed up in the bedroom, maybe crying, maybe stewing. I didn't go check. I didn't care. And something strange happened after that. I started feeling lighter. Not happy, not yet. But lighter. Freer. There's a peace that settles in when you finally stop explaining yourself to people who've already decided not to understand. I started working out again. Waking up early. Reading books I'd forgotten I even owned. My thoughts felt lighter once I stopped chasing approval. Without that constant need for validation weighing me down, everything in my head got sharper. Then one morning, out of nowhere, I got an email from a contractor I hadn't heard from in ages. Someone Vivian had recommended during Myra's second round of home renovations. Hey, just confirming you'll be covering the new tile job too? I stared at the message. Then typed back two simple words, not involved. Silence. Clean, echoing silence. From that moment on, I stopped bracing myself for the next passive-aggressive jab, the next fake friendly request disguised as concern, the next guilt-wrapped expectation. I knew who I was now, no longer the guy they kept around to pay the bills, not family in their eyes, but someone who remembered everything and forgot nothing. I left the house just before sunrise. Not out of spite. Not to make a statement. Just because. After too many days watching my own reflection disappear in a place that didn't feel like mine anymore, it felt like the only honest thing left to do. I had packed a small duffel bag the night before, a few shirts, my laptop, essential documents, and the keys to a condo I'd bought 5 years ago, back when I still believed in preparing for the future. The condo was on the 9th floor of a quiet high-rise, far from their world. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A view of the city skyline. But what hit me hardest when I stepped inside? Space. To breathe. This silence felt different. It wasn't the cold silence that sits between two people pretending nothing is wrong. No. This was fresh, open, undisturbed. It was mine. I dropped the bag onto the floor, let out a long breath, and felt the weight of months lift off my chest in one slow exhale. For the first time in years, I was alone with my thoughts, and they weren't screaming. Clara didn't call. Not that day. Not the next. Maybe she assumed I was pulling one of my silent protests. That I'd return like I always had, worn out but willing. Or maybe she simply didn't notice I was gone. I couldn't decide which was worse. 3 days passed before my phone lit up. It was Sabrina. We need help finishing the foundation work at Mom's place. You know she's getting older. This delay is really stressing her out. No greeting. No, how are you? No mention of the last conversation. Just another request. Another assumption that I'd step in and clean up. I stared at the message for a moment, then hit the call button. She picked up on the second ring, upbeat as ever. Knew you'd call back, she said with that smug little laugh. Seriously though, the builder's being difficult. He says if we don't get a new deposit, he's walking off the job. I'm sure Caleb can handle it, I said, calm and steady. There was a pause. Caleb, she repeated. But he had a beautiful wedding, didn't he? I cut in. Silence. Real, heavy silence. I didn't say another word. I let the quiet stretch, heavy and tight, the kind that sits in your chest when you realize someone forgot you on purpose and convinced themselves it was an accident. Then the line went dead. She hung up, and I smiled. Not out of cruelty, but realization. The power of silence isn't in the absence of sound. It's in the way it strips them of control. They don't know what to do when you stop explaining. When you stop saying yes. A few more days passed. No follow-ups from Sabrina. No guilt texts from Vivian. No sudden check-ins from Clara. And for once, I didn't wait. I filled my time. Moved my desk near the window. Picked up old projects I'd shelved years ago. cleared out my inbox, reconnected with clients, even reached out to a few nonprofits I'd always meant to help. This wasn't about proving anything. It was about living in my name, on my terms. I cooked my own food, played jazz in the mornings, sometimes just stood by the window, watching the city move and thinking about absolutely nothing. And that, to me, was the real shift. No more rehearsed arguments in my head. No more imaginary defenses to people who didn't listen. One afternoon, I walked down to the cafe around the corner. The new barista, Ivy, took my order. She smiled when I told her my name, wrote it on the cup, and said, "Nice to see a regular face. Most folks around here just stare at their phones." "Trying not to be one of them anymore," I said. She grinned. "Good luck with that." That night, I checked my phone again. Still nothing. But this time, the silence didn't feel like rejection. It felt like freedom. Then, just when I started to believe maybe they'd finally let go, Vivian called again. Her voice had changed. Tense, carefully composed, with panic just underneath. "The roof's leaking," she blurted. "The builder says he's walking. He's threatening legal action." "What is going on?" I stood by the window, sipping from a warm mug, watching the city lights blink. "I'm sure Caleb or Clara can handle it," I said, echoing her own casual indifference from all those years. "They said it's your responsibility," she snapped. And there it was. Finally, the truth spoken aloud. I had been the foundation under their feet, the one they assumed would always hold. That I'd fix, pay, protect. Silently. "Didn't I tell you?" I said softly. "What?" I let the words hang in the air. Let her sit in the chill that had lived inside me since the moment her daughter showed me those wedding photos. "Didn't I tell you?" I repeated, and I hung up. An hour later, the knock came. It was 9:15 p.m. when I opened the door. Clara stood there, coat too thin for the cold, eyes red and tired. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. I stepped aside without saying a word. She walked in slowly, eyes moving around the condo like she was seeing me for the first time in years. "This place is nice," she said quietly. I nodded. She sat down on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. "This is your family too," she whispered. "You can't just leave them like this." "No," I said, standing by the window. "Family doesn't cut you out of pictures. Or weddings. Or homes." She looked down. "I made a mistake," she murmured. "I didn't think it would matter." And somehow, that hurt more than all the lies. "You didn't think it would matter." I didn't respond. She looked up. "Can we talk?" I let the silence speak for me. And for the first time, she stayed in it. No performance. No rehearsed lines. Just her. Sitting in the wreckage. Staring at a version of me she hadn't met before. I was no longer the man who'd carry shame that didn't belong to him. When she finally stood up to leave, Clara turned back to me, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you still love me?" I looked at her. Not with anger. Not with hope. Just clarity. "I loved who I used to be when I was with you. But I don't miss who I became." She nodded. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She walked out without saying another word. And I returned to my silence, not because I was shattered, but because for the first time in years, I felt whole. You learn something when people underestimate you long enough. You stop correcting them. You let them believe what they want. That's what I did for years. To the Bennetts, I was just the tech guy. Just another IT consultant who somehow married into their family. They never asked what I actually did. Never wondered how I built my life, or why I never seemed worried about money. They weren't interested in my world, only in what I could give to theirs. That worked for me, because the less they knew, the more control I had. They didn't know I owned the consulting firm they thought I worked for. They didn't know I held rental properties all over the city, bought under a holding company with a forgettable name they wouldn't recognize even if it was printed on their own front door. They didn't know half the people they gossiped about at brunch, landlords, inspectors, HOA presidents had my number saved in their phones. And they definitely didn't know the house Vivian worshipped, the one I saved from foreclosure 5 years ago, was still legally tied to a financial line I held. Quietly. Cleanly. Indisputably. Back then, Caleb had gotten himself into trouble, gambling, I think. He ran to his mother. She came to me. The house was slipping. They needed a cosigner to stop the second mortgage from folding. I didn't ask questions. I just signed. But I made sure the paperwork did the talking. Hidden in the fine print was a clause, one that gave me the right to convert the lien into a personal debt if certain conditions weren't met. Spoiler, they weren't. And now, as I sat in my condo watching the lights of the city fade into dusk, I realized I wasn't holding on to anger anymore. I was holding leverage. That night, Julian came by. He walked in with a thick folder under his arm, updated LLC papers, transfer summaries, legal notices. We were putting the last pieces into place. This one, he said, pointing to a page with Vivian's property address, is your ace. The inspector's report is enough to activate the clause. If you want, we can start the process to seize her equity. 30 days. I didn't smile. Not out of restraint, just there was nothing to be smug about. I don't want the house, I said quietly. Julian gave me a look. Then what do you want? I want them to feel it, I replied. I want them to hear a door shut and realize it's locked behind them. He nodded. He understood. We finalized the documents. Everything tied to me, all the little threads they never saw, became public, official. Renovations were halted. Maintenance plans canceled. They'd need new inspections, fresh estimates, and contractors who didn't know their names and didn't care even if they did. The polished Bennett image, all that charm and judgment, started to crack. I didn't say a word. I didn't announce a thing. I just let the systems do their job. A week later, I received an email from a property manager confirming cancellation of the roofing project at Miss Bennett's residence. Unable to verify payment source. A day after that, Meyer's name appeared on my phone. I let it ring. Then came the voice message. You really think this is funny? Mom's losing it. The new contractors want upfront deposits we don't have. You know how long it takes to get approved for another loan? You're making this harder than it needs to be. I played it twice. Not to double-check her words, just to sit in the sound of entitlement so familiar, they still believed I existed for their benefit. A few hours later, Caleb sent a text. Not sure what's going on with Mom's place. Can we talk? I didn't answer. That evening, I got a message from someone unexpected, Hannah, Caleb's wife. We were never close. She was polite, quiet, always watching more than speaking. I used to think it was shyness. Now I realized it was awareness. She hadn't laughed when I was erased from their wedding. In fact, I barely remembered her in any of the photos Clara had shown me. Her message was simple. I'm sorry. I didn't know. If I had, I wouldn't have gone through with it. You deserved better. I read it twice, then locked my phone. The next day, I drove over to one of my properties in Eastwood, a modest apartment complex I'd quietly owned for years. 12 units. A small team that reported directly to me. I stood in the courtyard, listening to the sounds of life. Kids playing, someone grilling, neighbors chatting about laundry and weather. It reminded me what I'd been building while they were busy building narratives. I wasn't just surviving. I was planting roots, creating stability, investing in peace. I remembered a night long ago, Vivian laughing over wine, teasing that I wasn't as ambitious as Caleb. Said my little computer job was cute but unremarkable. I had laughed along. But standing now on the balcony of my own building, I finally saw the truth. I wasn't the quiet one. They were just blind. And their blindness had been the greatest favor they ever did for me. A few days later, Julian called. They got the letter, he said. Vivian hired a new lawyer. She's panicking, trying to renegotiate terms. She can't. You gave them 5 years of goodwill. You're within every legal right. I nodded, letting the words settle. I wasn't angry. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was just done. And being done? That's power. After the call, I looked around my condo, soft lighting, clean air, inbox empty, conscience quieter than ever. Let them have their brunches, their gossip, their curated smiles. I had something better. I had my name. I had my voice. I had my peace. And then it began. Faster than I expected. The unraveling. The panic. The cracks in their image. It started with a voicemail from Vivian. Her voice wasn't sharp anymore. It was breathless. Shaky. I need you to call me back. Please. The builder, he's threatening legal action. He says we defaulted on the revised contract. I didn't even know there was a new contract. They told me it was under your name. She sounded like someone who had finally lost the script. Like someone watching the stage collapse beneath her. And for the first time, I didn't call her back. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I finally understood I had to protect myself from falling back into the role they had always assigned me. The dependable crutch. The reliable fixer. That same afternoon, Clara sent me a text. It was long. Too long. I didn't read it all. Just skimmed through phrases like, I didn't think it would get this bad. We're still family. We can't let money ruin everything. But money didn't ruin anything. Silence did. Entitlement did. The assumption that I would never say enough. That night, I poured a glass of wine and stood at the window, watching the city breathe beneath me. Cars moved like veins. People passed like seasons. All of it oblivious to the quiet implosion surrounding the Bennett name. The same family that once whispered behind my back was now realizing their comfort sat on a foundation they never owned. A few days later, Clara showed up again. No text. No call. Just a knock. I looked through the peephole, hair tied back, no makeup, wearing the navy blue sweater I gave her for her birthday 3 years ago. I opened the door slowly. She didn't speak right away. Just looked at me, like she was searching for something familiar that wasn't there anymore. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She sat down in the same spot as before, but this time her shoulders carried more weight. "We're in trouble," she said. "I know," I replied. She looked up, surprised. Like she was expecting comfort. Like she still thought I'd move toward her. I didn't. I stayed where I was. Mom can't refinance the house because of the lien. Myra's business partner pulled out. Caleb and Hannah fight constantly now. It's like everything's falling apart. I nodded. Because it was never built right. She blinked, stunned by how calm I was. "I didn't come here to beg," she added. "I just wanted you to know it's not brunch and jokes anymore. We're dealing with real consequences now." "Good," I said. Real was overdue. She flinched slightly. "You think we deserve this?" "I think adulthood comes with consequences," I answered. "And when you repeatedly, deliberately exclude someone, when you treat them like a fixture instead of a person, you don't get to act surprised when they stop showing up." Silence stretched between us. "I came to ask for dinner," she said. "Not a favor. Not help. Just one dinner. Just to talk." I tilted my head, studied her expression. "I'll think about it," I said. The next day, I didn't go to work. I took the morning and drove to Myra's salon. There was a big for lease sign taped to the window. I parked, stepped out, and walked closer. The inside was hollow now, no chairs, no reception desk. Just empty walls and dust settling. A faded poster of Myra still clung to the corner window, smiling beside a curling iron under a slogan that read, "Confidence starts here." Ironic. I stood there for a moment, then got back in my car. Later that afternoon, I visited one of my commercial properties. Julian had arranged a walkthrough with a new tenant, a design firm looking to lease office space. I toured them through the building, negotiated with a clear mind, shook hands like a man who finally knew what he was building and why. After they left, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Clara. 1 voicemail. I hesitated, then pressed play. "I know you think I don't care. That I was part of everything that happened, but I wasn't trying to hurt you. I just didn't want to cause conflict. I thought it was easier to let things slide. And now everything's capsized. And maybe I deserve that. But I miss you. I miss how you used to take care of everything. I miss who we were before." I deleted the message. Not out of anger, but because I didn't want to carry her longing when she had never once carried mine. That night, I cooked for myself steak, roasted garlic, sautéed vegetables. I lit a candle, set the table, ate slow, not in loneliness, in presence. I thought about how many dinners I'd spent surrounded by people who spoke over me, how many events I'd paid for but hadn't truly been invited to, how many jokes were made at my expense, while I smiled, nodded, and poured more wine. Now I sat alone. And it was the most peaceful meal I'd had in years. The unraveling of the Bennetts didn't come in flames or headlines. It came quietly. Canceled projects. Frozen funds. Denied loan applications. Frayed connections. All the little things they took for granted, slowly slipping through their fingers. And the best part? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lift a hand. I simply stopped holding the thread. The news came from Ray, a friend I hadn't spoken to in months. Used to work with Caleb. One of the few decent ones in that circle. The kind who paid attention. He called while I was reviewing lease agreements at my desk. "You hear about Caleb and Hannah?" he asked. "No," I said, though I already knew where this was going. "They're separated. She moved out last weekend. Packed up and left. Went to stay with her sister." I didn't say anything. Ray continued. "Word is she told everyone it was because of what happened with you. Said the way the family treated you made her sick." I leaned back in my chair. "She said that?" "Yeah," he replied. "Apparently, she didn't even know you weren't invited to the wedding until someone brought it up at a dinner. Said when she saw how they laughed about it, she lost it. Said if they could do that to you, they could do it to anyone." I nodded, thanked him, ended the call. It didn't feel like victory, just confirmation. Confirmation that I hadn't imagined it, that I wasn't being too sensitive, that the quiet way I was pushed aside had been real and visible. That evening, I went for a walk. Golden hour bathed the streets in that cinematic light. A couple laughed outside a bakery. Someone walked their dog. And life, as always, moved forward. Oddly, so did my heart. Around that time, Sabrina got engaged. She posted about it everywhere, close-up ring shots, captions about second chances and forever love. But what stood out wasn't the announcement. It was the silence that followed. No offers to host the venue. No family enthusiasm. Not even Vivian, once the queen of arranging parties, was too busy now dealing with contractors and court dates. The financial safety net they had leaned on for 5 years had disappeared, and so had the illusion of effortless grace. A week later, Sabrina called. I didn't answer. She texted instead. I just want to know if we can be civil. I'd still love to have you at the wedding. You're important to us. That was the text. I read it, then deleted it. Not in anger, just closure. Later that same night, Clara messaged me again. This one was short. I miss how you used to take care of everything. That line settled in my chest longer than I wanted it to. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't ownership. It was nostalgia, selective and convenient. She didn't miss me. She missed the structure I provided, the calm I offered, the invisible scaffolding I built around all of them so they could shine while I faded into the background. I didn't answer. Instead, I stood by the window again, the city stretching out beneath me like a reminder of who I was before them and after. A man who builds. A man who protects. Who provides, not because it's demanded, but because that's who he is. They never knew that version of me. They only knew the quiet one. The agreeable one. The man folding napkins while they joked at his expense. I am not that man anymore. And strangely, I felt sorry for Clara. Because she wasn't grieving me. She was mourning the loss of control. 2 days later, Julian called. Thought you'd want to know, he said. Delphine's attorney reached out. She's trying to settle the lien outside of court. They're afraid the house will hit the listings. Let her sweat, I said. She already is, he replied with a low chuckle. Then he said something that made me pause. Ever thought about letting go? Entirely. I leaned back. What do you mean? I mean, the paperwork's done. You're protected. The accounts are sealed, their access cut off. You've made your point. So, do you want to stay tethered to any of this? Or walk away clean? I didn't answer right away. That night, I sat out on my balcony, the air still and cool, and for the first time since it all began, I allowed myself to imagine a version of peace that didn't include holding on to the past, not even the memory of it. What if I didn't just stop responding? What if I stopped remembering? No revenge. No finale. Just a quiet page turn. And for the first time, it felt possible. That was enough. The next morning, I called Julian. Pull back, I said. Start the process. All of it. Everything. All of it, I confirmed. Cut the line. Finalize the property transfers. Close out anything that still connects me to their names or their noise. Let them live in the house they built, without me. That's what they chose. I'm just honoring it. It's been nearly a year now. 12 full months since I stood in that kitchen and heard my wife, without hesitation, tell me her brother had already gotten married, without me. A year since Sabrina sipped wine and shrugged. Didn't we tell you? A year since I folded napkins with hope in my chest and went to bed with silence in my lungs. And now? Now I live in a home I chose. Every piece of furniture handpicked for function, for peace, not to impress anyone or match someone else's aesthetic. My mornings begin in stillness. My nights end without tension. I don't check my phone wondering who's going to take another piece of me. I don't carry invisible debts for roles I was never truly invited to fill. I carry only myself. And that has finally been enough. The condo, my condo, became something I didn't expect, a refuge. Not from the world, but from the man I used to be. The man who gave too much, explained too much, waited too long for people who never once clapped when he walked into a room. The silence now? It's not hollow. It's a wall, built brick by brick to keep out noise I no longer accept. Last week, I hosted a dinner. Small. Simple. Just a few people I trust. The kind who don't need convincing to care. Julian brought wine, of course he did. He's become more than just my lawyer. He's my anchor. My brother in the storm. My sister Nadia flew in from Florida. Brought her boyfriend. She used to worry about me. Now, she just hugs me longer and smiles wider. We passed plates, shared stories, laughed without effort. No floral arrangements. No catered drama. No pretending. Just presence. Somewhere between dessert and second glasses of wine, Julian leaned back and asked the question I knew was coming. Do you ever hear from Clara's family anymore? The room went quiet, not in tension, just curiosity. All eyes turned to me. I smiled. Not anymore, I said. I finally took the hint. Laughter followed. Warm. Real. That was it. No epic conclusion. No bitterness. Just a fact. A door quietly closed. I never blocked them. Never sent any cruel messages. Never aired their failings to the world. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't seen. Stopped lifting weight for people who never reached back. And that was my justice. The next morning, I went for a walk. There's a trail near the condo that leads to a quiet park by the water. I go there often. It grounds me. There's a bench I like, the one with the view of the lake reflecting the city skyline. The same skyline I used to stare at through glass walls during long, sleepless nights, wondering if I was the problem, if I wasn't trying hard enough to earn a seat at their table. But sitting here now, I understand something I didn't back then. It was never about trying harder. It was about trying for the wrong people. People who mistook kindness for weakness, silence for consent, familiarity for ownership. I stayed in that system for far too long, believing loyalty meant endurance. But loyalty without respect? That's just self-abandonment, dressed up in polite manners. And I'm not that man anymore. I've rebuilt my world. Smaller, tighter, stronger. Not built on obligation, but on mutual care. No more forcing value where it was never offered. No more squinting through neglect trying to find light. Sometimes I catch glimpses of the Bennetts, a tagged photo of Caleb, a story from Sabrina about wedding delays. I scroll past. Not with anger. With indifference. They live in a chapter one already closed. Clara? She reached out a few more times. Once through email. Once with a letter dropped off at the front desk. I read the first paragraph. That was enough. She said she missed me. But what she missed was convenience. The quiet man in the background. Fixing problems. Asking nothing. That version of me? He's gone. Buried under every joke I laughed off. Every party I paid for but wasn't invited to. Every dinner where I was the ghost in the room. And in his place? A man who smiles when the phone is silent. A man who eats alone without ever feeling alone. A man who builds his own table and fills the chairs with people who show up because they want to, not because they need something. So if anyone ever asks what happened to me, where I went, why I stopped speaking, I'll say this. I didn't leave with anger. I left with clarity. And by the time they realized what I carried, I was already gone.